your page and try it again. Radio. Okay, so if you can pull yourself, try to into the. Let's sit and face each other. Pull. That chair has to be spun around, basically. Radio to the max, KMMK 88.7 FM, Coggon, Cedar Rapids, talk radio for Catholic living. And we are coming at you with Kolbe Konnection episode number 162. I'm not wondering about the number today like I'm floundering sometimes because I'm typing up the quarterly report for the FCC. So I've been documenting all these former episodes of Kolbe Konnection. And we've had some pretty good stuff in the past with Father Dennis. He always has us hopping on topics. And but today we are going to continue from where we were last time, and we are delving into kind of a sneak peek at a book that we are working with right now with the station. And it's well, I think that a lot of you will be familiar with me passing out these books. It'd be nice to have a camera.
There we are.
But these Behold Your Mothers. I'm not going to hold it close to you, but if you have any questions about this book, contact us at kmmk-fm.org under Contact Us, and then or give us a call, 319-775-2579. Another way is to another way to contact us, 319-775-2579. And or if you have a question about what we're talking about, especially if you have an Islamic background, boy, Islamic, we'll have to look that one up. But if you have an Islamic background by one way, shape, or other, give us a call because we are kind of going open loop with this right now. I've contacted the mosque to try to get some dialogue going, but they are in between imams right now, so this is probably not a great time to try to get some time from the folks, and this will probably take a little bit of time to work these things through. But the idea is basically that we've been, last time on our show we started with Donald, of discussing this chapter in the Koran, which is donated to Mary. And why are we delving into that? Because we have a new Behold Your Mother, so I'll put the new one with the old one. And this is not out in press yet, and you can't get one. And please don't ask me for one right now because we're just trying to get prototypes over to reviewers. That's all we can do at this point. And we have an addendum to this, which used to be a booklet. Now it's turned into a book, and we have an addendum in there that it's called the Beholding Your Mother Throughout History. And so we don't talk about every apparition there is, but we do try to cover several important apparitions, several important miracles, several important women in church history that have done the act of, as it says in Genesis 3:15, of putting your heel against the head of Satan. There's some women in scriptures that have done that. There's Mary, of course, that fulfilled that as much as anybody can fulfill that. But then there is also people post the birth of Christ, such as Joan of Arc. So there's mighty women out there that have done both in what would you call it in a movie? The primary actress.
Heroine?
Well, yeah, but they call supporting actor, and what's the main actor called?
The star?
The star. There you go. The star. What an easy word. I was wondering about that several times. The star of the show. Well, in some cases, you've had people like St. Monica and also St. Helena who have done fantastic supporting roles. And I mean, I guess if you look at Mary herself, just in the birthing of Christ, you can call that a supporting role. But as a church, we know much better about the role of Mary. In fact, you can almost use her name with the church interchangeably. So what I'd like to do is drive back to the verse in the Koran. Well, we're in chapter 19 of the Koran, and then we've worked our way up to verse 33 of the Koran. Do you have a page for me on that?
Sure, 134.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I got my marker here. Okay, so before that, it talks about the child that Mary is going to have, that she's kind of in a distressful situation with her pregnancy. She's going into silence. There's some things that are similar to our Catholic scriptures. There's some things that are not familiar with our Catholic scriptures. And this goes way back to the beginning of the Koran. The first chapter is called the Cow. And it has the Genesis story. And it has, rather than Adam naming the animals and God giving dominion over the animals, God names the animals. So it's a different, they have some things that are similar but different. And this is one particular place. When we get down to verse 33, we have a similarity. And that says, so peace upon me the day I was born. And they're talking Christ, or what do you say that they call Christ?
Esau.
Okay.
Esau.
So they say, on the day I was born, and the day I die, and the day I get resurrected to life. So it doesn't say about the suffering, but it talks about the death and the resurrection. So, immediately I'm looking at this for the first time, maybe about 2 months ago, and the lights go on. I'm going, what's this about? And I go and say, well, obviously most Islamics don't believe this. So I got some other sources, and one was, I'm not even sure whether this thing I have on 135 is another piece of the Quran, because I haven't looked it up. But it does say Quran 4 on 135.
Yeah, and I've looked it up. It is.
Yeah. It's there. Okay, and I put bold on it because it's conflicting with this verse 33 business. So, and they're saying that things like people were making assumptions, and I don't know what that indent 1 is.
Well,
how
about we just
copied it straight up as I have.
Yeah,
it.
how about just read Koran 4 157 to 158.
Okay, so we just read our preferred verse in the Quran,
yes,
which is, peace be upon me the day I was born, and the day I die, and the day I get resurrected alive. And so go ahead.
So later actually earlier in the Quran, in chapter 4, the Surah Nisa, verses 157 to 158. And for boasting, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, or Isa, son of Mary, the messenger of Allah. But they neither killed nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so.
So it's kind of like, current agnostics or atheists, they say, oh, he swooned on the cross. But whatever the story is, he didn't do the thing that he said he did.
Right. And so what we've got here, Tony, is an apparent contradiction, or just a contradiction, because chapter 19, verse 33 talks about death and resurrection. Chapter 4, 157, 158 says he was not killed, he was not crucified. And And so we wonder why this is. And, it's the argument, as we discussed on the last show, Tony, comes back to the Muslims pointing to Psalm 91 and saying, I'll just paraphrase, basically, God will not allow Jesus to be hurt, unless you cast your foot against a stone, that sort of thing. So in a nutshell, the argument proposed by Muslims is that the Son of God, or God, could not be hurt, therefore could not die a violent death through crucifixion. And
they're proving it with our own scriptures.
And they're pointing to Psalm 91 as evidence.
Right.
Now, to me, though, this does present a logical fallacy because, or at least potentially, because if the Koran is correct that Psalm 91 literally prevents the Son of God or God from harm.
Now the Koran doesn't say that.
Well, if they're pointing back to if they're pointing back to Psalm 91 that God cannot be harmed, and if Jesus did not die or was not harmed, a conclusion here is that Jesus must therefore be God or the Son of God, and so
now why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because if Psalm 90, we're talking about Esau. And if Esau can't be harmed due to Psalm 91...
Notice how they put the name Esau in front of him rather than Jacob, because Esau's the Islamic son.
Well, it's Esau.
Before
Islam, ISA.
Right.
Esau.
But I'm saying Miriam. There's a reason why they put that name. What does that have to do with Mary?
Well,
but it's Moses' sister, and that's where all the names of Mary are derived from.
Yes.
So, and they're in the Hebrews. Well, just reading our own scriptures, the scriptures are rife with Marys.
Yes, yes, and it is important to keep track of them.
Right.
But let me continue. So the logical or the potential logical fallacy, and then I'll offer some explanation as proposed by Muslim clerics for this. If Psalm 91 says that Esau can't be harmed, and if Esau indeed was not harmed per chapter 4, verse 157 that we just read,
right,
then we're talking about a person who was not harmed because he couldn't be, but he couldn't be because he was the Son of God or was God. So you get
you're saying you can't have it both ways.
Exactly.
So it's either that he was the Son of God and he didn't go through any of this suffering, he didn't die, he's living forever.
Yeah.
But
and so that's where, again,
but they don't take it to the logical conclusion because they would still be calling him the Son of God for a different reason.
Right. And so this is where it's at a minimum, Tony, it's incomplete relative to the Bible as we know it.
Right.
And you could say that it's a misinterpretation or a twisting, or you could put some other words on it. But in any case, it is a logical fallacy that they come up with. However, and please let me continue. However, this has been pointed out, and there's been a number of explanations offered in the Muslim community through clerics over time, some dating back centuries and centuries.
Right.
And so let me just quickly enumerate some of these. So the first one is what we call the substitution theory. And the substitution theory says, yes, somebody was crucified, somebody was killed, but it wasn't Esau.
Okay.
So they substituted somebody, some doppelganger came out of nowhere. Maybe Simon of Cyrene kept carrying the cross. I don't know, but there's some sort of and so that's how he escaped. That's one explanation offered. There's another explanation offered that, well, yes, Esau was indeed crucified. He hung on the cross, but he didn't die.
Right.
They took him down. He was still living.
Swung.
Yes, so they rescued him somehow. Another one is pointing to, chapter 4, verse 157 as merely being conjecture. And that's where if you read sort of the preface of it, it says, and let me try to find the exact word here, Tony.
Now, 157, I didn't. That's on 135.
It's on 135. Yes, so it says, and for boasting. You see, this is the preface. And for boasting, and of course this is in English, not Arabic. But basically, the preface of this whole statement is, or could be taken as kind of a what if.
Yeah.
And so that's another explanation offered. And then the other thing is that that they point back to chapter 19, verse 33, which talks about the death and resurrection, that they're actually claiming that 1933 talks about a different death and a different resurrection at some later time after the crucifixion, some natural death that occurs at some future date. So overall though, I mean, what this comes down to is there is not a consistent narrative in the Koran with these two phrases that we take in direct comparison, but there are explanations offered that, you know, who are we to judge? I mean, some of them seem more likely than others, but I'm certainly not a biblical expert nor an expert in the Koran by any means. We do know that the Koran exalts Jesus as a great prophet, a very, very holy man. You know, they do say a number of positive things about him and his mother.
Right.
But
then you go back to the old TV commercial of the hamburger of the old lady says, takes the burger
where's
out.
the beef?
Where's the beef?
Where's the beef? Yeah, and so that's where, relative to the Bible and the narrative that we share, you know, this just comes up short. And I think that's where, you know, I'd love to, you know, hear more about this from a Muslim someday. But
right.
But in the meantime, you know, we have had, and putting this in a time frame, number of these explanations, you know, again, Muhammad was back in the 6th century, and a number of these explanations came along 7th, 8th century fairly early on.
Right.
But since that time, you know, we've had, you know, a number of Catholic explanations and discussions about this, and I think, Tony, that's where you want to, you know, talk about one of the big ones here.
Right, which is Thomas Aquinas. But let's just say the rest of this piece about we killed the Messiah, Jesus, the Son of Mary, the messenger of Allah, but they neither killed nor crucified him. It was only appeared so.
Made to appear so. Yeah, right. And then that's where it's the substitution or the he didn't actually die and was somehow rescued, or
yours filled in kind of the missing of what this doesn't get into. But then they go, even, and just to summarize that, even those who argue for this, quotes, crucifixion are in doubt. They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions. They certainly did not kill him. Rather, Allah raised him
up to himself. And Allah is almighty and all wise. So, yes, and so they are very literally saying Isa, Jesus, was not killed via crucifixion, and somehow Allah raised him.
Right.
And now again, they don't say Allah raised him at that particular point in time. Maybe it was 30 years later after a natural death. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities, which is what these explanations that I shared earlier suggest.
Well, so, you know, when you think about Muhammad writing Quran, but not writing Quran, he's doing these writings and preaching.
Yes.
The Quran comes generations later.
He made his notes, and they were compiled after his death. Yes.
So it's not like he can ignore this Christ thing. So he has to speak to it some way, shape, or form, because you have all of these Abrahamic people that are going to be listening to whatever you're saying.
Right.
And so, you know, he's got to address it somewhat, but it's kind of walking on eggshells. He can't say too much, he can't say too little, and so I think that's what we're stuck with these two verses. Not too much, not too little, and so he doesn't want to. Well, he can't totally acknowledge him, or else what is he being a prophet for?
Right.
Well, so the way that I look at the Islamic right now is when you have curtailed yourself into this situation, you have I'm going to call it a self-declared prophet. The other piece that Fulton Sheen brings up is that there is no prophet that's not announced. Mm-hmm. This is an important deal because this is just like, this guy's out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen with Christian Judeo prophets. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen that way. Mm-hmm. So you could say, well, John, what about John? Maybe that's an exception. But Jesus said, if you'll accept it, John is Elijah. Right. Elijah, Micah says that he's supposed to come before that great and powerful day. Well, okay. So there is some finessing there. So all I can say is that he's kind of, in a way, doing the same type of thing because he has to say something about it. He can't drop the topic. So anyway, you have this great admiration for the Blessed Mother in Islamic. Yes. And you've got some examples of that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, just as related here, obviously we have an entire chapter in the Koran, which, devoted, she's the only woman mentioned by name in the Koran.
Okay.
That's...
because that's not how women were not...
And her name is mentioned roughly twice as much as in the Bible. So, just for reference.
Yeah.
So, obviously held in great esteem. I saw this myself. There's a house called Mary's House outside of Ephesus, Turkey. And of course,
I got something for you.
Our history, there we are. Yes, absolutely.
This was taken by a young lady.
This is Mary's house right there, and I've been there. So this, as we know, our church history would tell us, John took Mary and they went to up to Ephesus where there was a community, and she lived there a number of years, and Catherine Emmerich. The mystic in the 19th century, now saint, she identified where these ruins would be of this house, even though she was bedridden herself. And sure enough, some explorers / archaeologists, priests went and found it. And my point is that I've visited this place twice, Tony, and I was one of the few Christians there. It was like 99% Muslims, mainly women. But this is an extremely holy site to Muslims. They venerate the place, and it is a very, very holy place indeed. So a lot of commonality there. In Israel, of course, we have what's called the Cave of the Patriarchs, and so this is where Abraham is buried, along with Sarah and Isaac and Rebecca and family members, and this is considered the second holiest place in Judaism.
Oh, but by the way, bless yourself with this before I forget and you go.
Our Lady of Ephesus, yes, thank you. So the Cave of the Patriarchs in Israel, second holiest place in Judaism, after of course the temple.
So the
cave of the Patriarchs. Okay. So where Abraham is buried.
Okay, sure.
And this is held in very high esteem by Muslims as well, and to the point where now the cave is actually separated with a fence. And they have two different entrances for Muslims and for Jews, and I guess the Christians probably go in the Jewish side.
The thing you were talking about is Nazareth, right?
Sorry,
Bethlehem.
Yes.
Right next to Jerusalem.
Well, that's Palestine, so we've got a different political split here. Right. The Cave of the Patriarchs is actually in the West Bank, so that is part of Palestine right now too. Okay. I've not been there. Little bit of a hot zone right now.
Right.
But and then the third example I wanted to just bring up here is I'll call it the Dome of the Rock, but basically in Jerusalem in the Old Quarter we have what's considered obviously the big thing for Judaism is this is where the first and the second temple stood,
right.
And even going back further, there's something called the foundation stone, which sits upon the top of this mound. The foundation stone, according to Judaism lore, and since we as Catholics, Christians come from Judaism, I think this is part of our lore as well. This is where God created the world. This is the first piece of earth, if you will.
Wow.
And it's where he, got the clay and made Adam. I mean,
wow.
this is the point, and this is why it is so important.
This is interesting because the New Jerusalem is supposed to come down from heaven, and where do you think the GPS is going to be? Probably aiming right to...
And it gets even better, Tony, because this same foundation rock is thought to be the altar stone that Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac on.
Sure.
And so you have all this tying together, and then it's the temple, and this is why the temple's there, first and second temple.
A thing that backs that is Melchizedek, who was the king of Salem, which is an earlier version of Jerusalem.
Yes, exactly. And so they were, and there's that phrase in the Bible about, that mentions Melchizedek. So,
Yep.
And obviously, to us, Jesus, teaching in the temple, being in the temple, the finding of Jesus in the temple, all of that, and there's, Mary served in the temple, all of this thing. So it ties back. But let's jump also to the Islam view. Well, the Dome of the Rock, or the plateau, if you will, which is now the top of the ruined temple that was torn down, this is where Muhammad made his famous flight from Mecca. And so the story, very briefly, is Muhammad flew on a winged beast with the help of Gabriel from Mecca to Jerusalem in one night. He then ascended through 7 levels of heaven, meeting various prophets and whatnot along the way, as well as Allah.
When he's down.
No. This is in Jerusalem. And then he came back down on the mount, the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and then went back on this winged beast back to Mecca. And this happened all in one night. And so this is, because of this, the Dome of the Rock is considered the third holiest Muslim site after Medina and Mecca.
Now, the Mosque of Omar, that is not right on top of this. This is a little bit of distance.
Actually, it is. If you look at a map, Tony, the mount, if you will, is a very flat topped surface now, and it's multiple acres in size. Mm-hmm. And the big mosque, which is technically that third holiest place, is on the southern portion of this mount. Okay. Whereas the dome that we see, that blue dome building in kind of the middle, it's all part of the same complex.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all part of the same complex, and that's obviously a very important place for Jews, Muslims, and Christians.
Okay, so one more thing that happens there is he goes to heaven.
Yes.
Supposedly, during that time, it was a Catholic church there.
Yes.
So he rises to heaven on a Catholic church.
Well, it was a... the mosque had not been built at the time. This is true, at least not at that site. But this was, during a turbulent time when the Muslims were attacking the Christians and whatnot. So
pre-Crusades.
Yeah, pre-Crusades, and so I don't know my history well enough, Tony, but I suspect that there was a church, but it had probably been semi-abandoned, if not outright taken over by that time. Okay. But again, you can go into details in the.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit to the Psalm 119. So he's using this as a refutation.
Psalm 91.
Psalm 91.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So as a refutation, but the other piece of it is that the devil also used Psalm 91 in the second temptation of Jesus in the desert.
Right.
And so he said, well, put yourself at the parapet of the temple, let yourself fall down. He will not allow your foot to be dashed against the stone. Well, Jesus refutes that. So, and then also there's a similar, and we went over this last time, with Peter saying, God forbid that you should go to Jerusalem and die. And Jesus says, "Get thee behind thee, Satan." So he's going through a temptation with one of his disciples. So in both instances, Jesus slam dunks this Psalm 91 as being a refutation for anything.
Right. No, he exactly. In Jesus' own words, he basically eliminates Psalm 91 as an explanation.
Well, I just thought it was funny that they picked up on that particular, because there's other places where they could have found that.
But that's the point, I think, Tony, is that the Koran doesn't include those phrases of Jesus that you just mentioned.
Right.
It is less complete relative to the Bible. And so absent those refutations by Jesus, what else does the Koran have? They just still have Psalm 91.
Right. So they, in other words, they have from whatever time that they had this, and I'm just saying, say the explanation came pre-Thomas Aquinas.
Yes, well,
because when they basically used the Western philosophers, which a lot of people say was Jewish thinking from the Diaspora, they ended up way over there, and that was Jewish thinking that we say is Platonic, seeking perfect love, truth, justice, goodness, beauty, and being, and so. They've and the logic that went along with that, and were able to really have a lot of people. Maybe they even themselves decided on Christianity, but they didn't have good apologetics going. They didn't have it's more than apologetics, because apologetics is just an answer to a question, and that could go on and on. The blog space is just full of that kind of stuff. It's not the thinking process, it's just a refutation for a specific question or a specific statement or a specific stance. Then they try to unwind that way. So anyway, we're going to come to the point now of, we're saying anybody that denies this truth of Jesus being Lord, it's the Antichrist. And we see this from John chapter, not John chapter, 1 John, it's the epistles of John, where he kind of cleaned up a few things, a few questions that were going around after he's writing his Gospels, well polished, and what do they often call John's Gospels compared to the rest of them? Mystic Gospels. They get really into the spiritual.
Right. Well, and again, Tony, this is, I'll just view the Bible here as where the Koran leaves off. I mean, that's where, the Koran took it as far as it could, or as far as it chose to, and now we have a whole lot more.
So I'm going to go to like 144-ish.
Sure.
We're making reference to this book that nobody in the world has access to yet. It'll be, thank God, because we need to get some of this stuff squared away first. Let's see. I thought I had it on 144, but I'm not seeing it. It's probably right before the.
What are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking for, first of all, the Aquinas business, which is like a 148 thing.
Yeah.
But it should be a little bit before that.
Well, and I think what it comes down to is these various explanations can be bandied around, but it really comes down to, you remember MythBusters? Is it real? Is it plausible? Is it possible?
Yeah.
Well, anything's possible. Anything is possible with God, but what is most probable here?
Right.
And that's where
using Occam's razor.
Exactly, and that's
Who was a
144.
Catholic guy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The less amount of assumptions to come to the best conclusion for something. I cannot find that reference to the Epistle of John, and it should have been right before this Aquinas piece. And I think I'm going to let that go because I can't find it. But basically, the gist of it, here we go, 148. No one needs to condemn such a stance, and this stance is denying the divinity of Christ, For by 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, and then it goes on 22 through 23, they condemn themselves. However, St. Thomas Aquinas addressed the question. Now, wait a minute. I want to go back and catch the actual text. So that's up in mid-page. The epistles of John sternly warn about the rejection of Jesus as God. The gospel speaks in 1 John 2:18, children, it is the final hour, just as you heard that the Antichrist was coming. So now many such Antichrists have appeared. And verse 22, who is a liar? He who denies that Jesus is the Christ. He is the Antichrist, denying the Father and the Son. Anyone who denies the Son has no claim on the Father, but he who acknowledges the Son can claim the Father as well. So what I wanted to do was find something from Thomas Aquinas that pointed to this section of John and applied it to, well, just what he had to say about the Antichrist and in applying to this to certain situations. And there are, as I found out, two different summas. One is the Theologica, which most people think of when they say the word summa, but there's another one called Summa Gentilis, which is against the Gentiles. And so he does speak to this verse in here of John 2:18. But he also has, I had to apply it. And so I had to put a lot of Tony writing with Aquinas writing. And it's just when you're writing something like this, you don't want people to have to unravel that sort of stuff. You'd like Aquinas when I was trying to wrestle and put my own little thing together, I finally got an AI helper. It was either Magis AI or Magisterium AI to help point me to yet a third source of Thomas Aquinas writing. And this one is to a cantor at Antioch. Now, this isn't this place.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is Ephesus. Antioch.
Right, Antioch is a different place, yes.
Antioch is that the one where they said they first called, used the word Christian, or was that Ephesus?
No, I think it was not Ephesus.
So I think it's Antioch.
Yeah,
Antioch.
well, Antioch is where Paul left on his journeys from.
Okay.
Sort of the headquarters up there.
Okay. And so in the introduction, Thomas states that the gates of hell would not prevail against it, that the faith of the church entrusted to him would hold out inviolate against these gates of hell. He addressed the faithful of Christ, saying, proclaim the Lord Christ holy in your hearts. And that's from 1 Peter. That is by firmness of faith. With this foundation established in our hearts, we can be safe against any attacks or ridicule of unbelievers against our faith. Therefore, Peter adds, always have your answer ready for people who ask for the reason for your hope that you have. So in chapter 7 of this book to the cantor, Thomas answers the above question in full. So I'm going to start into that. That's on page 149.
Okay.
So the foregoing shows that there is no contradiction in our professing that the only begotten Word of God suffered and died. We do not attribute this to him according to his divine nature, but according to his human nature, which he assumed into the unity of his person for our salvation. So one thing he gets straight right off the bat is the human nature of God and the divine nature of God. When the Saracens or Muslims back in that day or Muhammad, they did not have a good distinction of those two pieces, because that was caused by a council convened by Constantine, because he was trying to use Christianity to glue the kingdom together, and there was these fractions of Arians that were out there trying to make a vision of something he was trying to control.
Again, Tony, as I view the Koran, they take Jesus or Isa as basically a human prophet, and they take it that far,
right?
And they don't take it any further, despite the fact of chapter 1933 that we already talked about with the death and resurrection. But they just
follow through.
They just don't keep it going, right? And that's that's simple. It's just different.
Well, but it keeps again, he's walking this fine line of having to say something,
right?
But
once
not saying the whole thing.
Once you've got chapter 1933 out there,
right?
Then what do you do with it?
I know it.
Yes, and
that's what we're making a fuss of. That's what we're making.
That's where you are. But at this point, really, all that we're doing is saying, okay, they dropped the ball,
right?
Shall we say, relative to our understanding, or to our beliefs. Relative to our beliefs, they dropped the ball.
But see, the same way that Augustine takes in the City of God, he takes all these gods to task inch by inch. Mm-hmm. Every one of their stories, he unravels them, and he turns them and says, you, God, could be replaced by this other God over here, Felicity, which is the God of love. And then every so often, when he doesn't just drop it at that, he'll say what the God of love is, the real God of love, the inventor of love. The thing that it's not just of a possession like a human person would have. He is the definition of love. Of course, you'd really want to say it's loving because he's a spirit being, and you can't say, it's kind of hard to imagine a runner running without a runner. But that's kind of how God is. He is loving without love, because that would be attributed to a person that had flesh and bones, for instance. Yeah. And he's way above that.
Well, and this whole thing, if the Koran didn't have that 1933 in it, we wouldn't be even having this discussion. No. It would just be, hey, they just thought this, Jesus was a nice guy.
Nice guy.
I mean, and that's their belief. Good for them.
Right.
And we believe different.
Well, and there's a lot of people that go run with that ball today.
Yeah.
We're just going to take this morality.
It is. Right. But because it's in there, this is where we then say, hey, let's have a further discussion, and this is where now there's been a lot of church fathers here have discussed this that you're getting into, Tony. So
here's the major church father.
So let's with 15 minutes left, let's try to hit the top things. Yeah.
But if someone objects that since God is almighty, he could have saved the human race otherwise than by his death of his only begotten Son, such a person ought to observe that God's deeds we must consider what was most fitting way of acting, even if he could have acted otherwise. Otherwise, we will be faced with the question in everything he made. Thus, if we ask why God made heaven of a certain size and why he made the stars in such a manner, a wise thinker will look for what is fitting for God to do, even if he could have done otherwise. I say this supposing our belief that the whole disposition of nature and all human acts are subject to divine providence. Take this belief away, and all worship of divinity is excluded. Yet we argue presently against those who say they are worshippers of God, whether Muslim or Christian or Jews. As for those who say that everything comes necessarily from God, we argue at length elsewhere. So we can say to another piece in there, did Mary need to be, Mary in the studio, for those who are watching us on YouTube, she is front and center here. Did she have to be this ever virgin to birth a God? Well, no, God can do anything he wants. But the deal is that how things are done are the best way they could have been done. You'd say, oh, gee, if I went to work today and my car got hit by lightning, I felt some tingling in my fingers. I tried to keep my hands off all of the stuff. That shouldn't have happened. Well, no, Aquinas always argues that the way things are is the way things should have happened, and there's a reason for them. You can't say, well, that wrecked my day. Well, you have to have a proper version of suffering in your mind to get along with that.
To me, Tony, this really just comes down to faith. I mean, either you have faith that God is doing the right stuff for us,
right,
or you don't.
Providence.
Yeah,
it's either providence or
faith,
not providence.
It's faith, and you can second guess it all you want, but why not just surrender?
Do you want to have that? Therefore.
No, I'm not sure where we got to. Therefore, if someone considers with a pious intention the fittingness of the suffering and death of Christ, he will find such a depth of knowledge that at any time he thinks about it, he will find more and greater things, so that he can experience as true what the apostle says. We are preaching a crucified Christ. To the Jews, an obstacle they cannot get over. To the Gentiles, foolishness. And I guess we could throw in the Muslims there too, that that they avoid the topic or don't explore it further.
So he's writing to Islam. He's writing to Jews. He's writing to atheists.
Yeah, and in a nutshell, he's basically making the case for the crucifixion. Mm-hmm. Which then is followed by the resurrection and everything else that we believe goes along with it. He does go on for a few pages here, Tony. I'm not sure what you want to. Okay, good. Well.
Okay, so the last part of that.
Yeah. So. Where was I at? So we are preaching to those who be called. Christ who is both the power of God and the wisdom of God, he continues, God's folly is wiser than human wisdom. Well, first of all, we must observe that Christ assumed a human nature to repair the fall of man, as we have said. Therefore, according to his human nature, Christ should have suffered and done whatever would serve as a remedy for sin. The sin of man consists in cleaving to bodily things and neglecting spiritual goods. Therefore, the Son of God, in his human nature, fittingly showed by what he did and suffered that men should consider temporal goods or evils as nothing, lest a disordered love for them impede them from being dedicated to spiritual things.
So St. Francis took that to the nth degree.
Yes.
He in fact, there's a lot of people say that he could have lived a lot longer had he treated himself better. But if he treated himself better, he would have not been able to, I want to say, earn the stigmata. Mm-hmm. So I can't imagine Francis without his stigmata. It just doesn't make sense. Thus, Christ chose poor parents, although perfect in virtue, lest anyone glory in mere nobility of flesh and in the wealth of his parents. Now this is going into the detailed explanation of why things are the way they were. He's led a poor life to teach us to despise riches. He lived without titles or office so as to withdraw men from a disordered desire for these things. He underwent labor, thirst, hunger, and bodily affliction so that men would not be fixed on pleasure and delights, but be drawn away from the good of virtue because of the hardship of this life. In the end, he underwent death so that no one would desert the truth because of fear of death. And lest anyone fear a shameful death for the sake of the truth, he chose the most horrible kind of death, that of the cross. Thus it was fitting that the Son of God, made man, should suffer, and by his example provoke men to virtue, so as to verify what Peter said in 1 Peter, Christ suffered for you and left an example for you to follow in his steps. Then, because not only good conduct and avoiding sins is necessary for salvation, but also the knowledge of truth so as to avoid error, it was necessary for the restoration of the human race that the only begotten Word of God, who assumed a human nature, should ground people in truth by a sure knowledge of it. Truth taught by men is not so firmly believed because man can deceive. Only by God can knowledge of the truth be confirmed without any doubt. So the Son of God, made man, had to propose the teaching of divine truth to men, showing them that it came from God and not from man. He did this by many miracles, since he did things that only God can do, such as raising the dead, giving sight to the blind. People have to believe that he spoke with God's authority. So he is, the people say that they, Aquinas was just so, what do you want to call it? Autistic, savant. Mm-hmm. And they said he needed to be because we are such scatterbrains today. Mm-hmm. And this just lays it out in perfect, everything perfectly, why it needed to be done the way it did. Leaving no doubt or any arguments to the contrary, such as these, loose arguments, say, of, these defenses for chapter 19, verse 33.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, continuing on. So you want to?
Those, yes.
Do we want to read through the last couple pages here? We've got about 5 minutes left. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Those who were present could see his miracles, but later generations might say they were made up. Therefore, divine wisdom provided a remedy against this in Christ's state of weakness. For if he were rich, powerful, and established in high dignity, it could be thought that his teaching and his miracles were received on account of his favor and human power. So to make the work of divine power apparent, he chose everything that was rejected and low in the world, a poor mother and a poor life, illiterate disciples and messengers, and allowed himself to be rebuked and condemned even to death by the magnates of this world. This made it apparent that his miracles and teachings were not received because of human power, but should be attributed to divine power. And I'd add here, too, that many of the people that he healed, they were, very low in society as well. So,
beggars at the gates.
Yeah, and
do you want a drink?
No, I'm good. Okay. And and if I could just jump down a very short tangent, the Koran also does mention Isa healing lepers and healing the blind. I mean, there again, we have a lot of similarities, but it just stops.
Right.
So. You want me to continue, or?
Thus, yeah.
Thus in what he did or suffered, human weakness and divine power were joined together at the same time. Thus at his nativity he was wrapped in cloth and put in a manger, but praised by the angels, endured by the Magi, led by a star. He was tempted by the devil, but ministered to by angels. He lived without money as a beggar, but raised the dead and gave sight to the blind. He died
even to the point of not being able to pay temple tax. He get Peter to get some money out of a fish mouth.
He died fixed to the cross and numbered among thieves, but at his death the sun darkened, the earth trembled, stones split, graves opened, and the bodies of the dead were raised. Therefore, if anyone considers the great fruit of such beginnings, namely the conversion of peoples over the world to Christ, and wants further signs in order to believe, he must be considered harder than a stone, since at Christ's death even stones were shattered. Thus the apostle says, and this is in Corinthians, the message of the cross is folly for those who are on their way to ruin, but for those of us who are on the road to salvation, it is the power of God.
So there is a related point we should make here. This is still Aquinas talking. The same reason of providence, which led the Son of God, made man, to suffer weakness in himself, led him to desire his disciples, whom he established as ministers of human salvation, to be abject in this world. Thus he did not choose the well-educated and noble, but illiterate and ignoble men, that is, poor fishermen. Sending them to work for salvation of men, he commanded them to observe poverty, to suffer persecutions and insults, and even to undergo death for the truth. This was so that their preaching might not seem fabricated for the sake of earthly comfort, and that the salvation of the world might not be attributed to human wisdom or power, but only to God's wisdom and power. Thus, they did not lack divine power to work miracles as they appeared abject according to the world. For the restoration of man, it was necessary for men to learn not to trust proudly in themselves, but in God. For the perfection of human justice requires that man should subject himself totally to God, for whom he also hopes to gain every good, and should thank him for what he has received, in order to train his disciples to despise the present goods of this world and to sustain all sorts of adversity, even to death. There is no better way than for Christ to suffer and die. Thus he would himself told them, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you too. Then we must observe that in order of justice, sin should be punished by a penalty. We see how cases of injustice are handled in human courts, that the judge takes from the one who has too much through grabbing what belongs to another and gives it to the one who has less. Anyone who sins overindulges his appetite, and in satisfying it transgresses the order of reason and divine law. For that person to be brought back into order of justice, something must be taken from what he wants. That is done by punishing him or taking the goods he wanted to have, or by imposing the bad things he refused to suffer. You want to do that?
Sure. This restoration of justice by penalty sometimes is done by the will of the one who is punished, when he imposes the penalty on himself so as to return to justice. Other times it is done against his will, and in that case he does not return to a state of justice, but justice is carried out in him. The whole human race was subject to sin. To be restored to the state of justice, there would have to be a penalty which man would take upon himself in order to fulfill the order of divine justice. But no mere man could satisfy God sufficiently by accepting some voluntary punishment, even for his own sin, to say nothing of the sin of the whole human race. For when man sins, he transgresses the law of God and tries, were he able, to do injury to the God of infinite majesty. The greater the person offended, the greater the crime. We see, for instance, that someone who strikes a soldier is punished more than someone who strikes a farmer, and much more if he strikes a king or prince. Therefore, a sin committed against the law of God is somehow an infinite offense. Again, we must observe that the dignity of the person making reparation is also to be considered. For example, one word of a king asking for pardon of an offense is considered greater than if someone lower went on his knees and showed any other sign of humiliation to beg pardon from the one who suffered the injury. But no mere man has the infinite dignity required to satisfy justly an offense against God. Therefore, there had to be a man of infinite dignity who would undergo the penalty for all so as to satisfy fully for the sins of the whole world. Therefore, the only begotten Word of God, true God and Son of God, assumed a human nature and willed to suffer death in it, so as to purify the whole human race indebted by sin. As Peter says, Christ himself died once and for all for sins, the upright for the sake of the guilty. Therefore, it is not fitting, as Muslims think, for God to wipe away human sins without satisfaction, or even to have never permitted man to fall into sin. That would first be contrary to the order of justice, and second to the order of human nature, by which man has free will and can choose good over evil. God's providence does not destroy the nature and order of things, but preserves them. So God's wisdom was most evident in his preserving the order of justice and of nature, and at the same time mercifully providing man a saving remedy in the incarnation and death of his Son. And so that is Thomas Aquinas's words on all of this.
So I just had a few comments on this, on the defense. I thought of another little side piece of it. Islam. Who is going to, in terms of the Islamic nation, faith, whatever, who is going to pay this debt for the original sin? Mm-hmm. Who is it? if it's not, it's nobody from Islam. If it's not the Christ from Christianity, who is it? Is it going to be done yet? So just if you want to try to bring these deep questions way to the ground, and it's not that we're going to do it in the last 5 minutes of this show, but it's a question. It's a kind of a rhetorical question. If not Christ, then who?
But again, Tony, Muslims do not believe in original sin the way that we as Catholics do. They actually believe that people enter the world without a sin attached. So there's nothing for them to need to have forgiven.
But they have this little devil and the little angel on each shoulder.
Right. But I'm just saying it's a different construct. In their belief, they don't feel that, they don't have anything to actually forgive, and then that of course supports the statement that you don't need to have a crucifixion of a God, right. and so again this it's different. That's all I can say. It's different, and it is a subset at best of what we have.
Well, not only that, but I think it's a subset more of Judaism than it is a subset of Christianity.
Well, yeah, and we really haven't talked about Judaism much at all here. I mean, at least in the Koran, they acknowledge this Esau guy, this nice guy.
Right.
Jews don't acknowledge him at all.
Well,
so,
they say he was the son of a soldier. In fact,
other than that, he was a rabble rouser in the temple. Right. So
the angelic doctor, Thomas Aquinas, shows once again that the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The church, which is the church. Additionally, this is another instance of she will strike your head. As Thomas was a great devotee of Mary, as his Dominican order, he was and is able to conquer evil as showcased above. But let us not make small of the ardent task involved to bring these truths forward into culture with the power from above. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you will renew the face of the earth, from Psalm 104. On Pentecost's responsorial to the fourth optional reading, then everyone shall be rescued who calls on the name of the Lord, a remnant, and survivors whom the Lord shall call. And this is from Joel 3, verse 5. The church resonates with, Lord, send out your spirit and renew the face of the earth. And I would say a guide to apologetics is chapter 17, Mary and the Muslims in the book, the world's first love, Mary, the Mother of God, which is an abridged edition. I would suggest the abridged edition by Venerable Fulton J. Sheen, to help if you want to, go into the actual apologetics of this situation with a Islamic friend. Mm-hmm. And obviously not enough room in this book to reprint all that.
No. And again, that's where, there's a lot of similarities, and I feel, Tony, we should absolutely be trying to reach out to our brothers and sisters around the world of all faiths and whatnot.
You should start with the similarities.
And there are a huge number of similarities that we've mentioned many of them. There's many more, but we have focused really on a lot of our talk here today on this one big difference, right. which is important that we understand as Christians.
And I would recommend Koran for reading. Now, I haven't personally done it myself because I got choked up on, the first chapter, the cow, once they start saying things like God named the animals. I was making my eyes cross. I think what you could do when you're going through the Koran and seeing these differences, first of all, note them. Get a copy of the Koran that you can mark up. There are more preferred versions of the Koran if you would, have a hard copy to mark it up. I know that they preach that you learn Arabic and that you read it in Arabic. They don't it's just that, well, if we have to tolerate any of the English versions, they do have a preferred one, but the preferred way is to learn the Arabic, I guess the same way as the Jewish, they would want you to go to Hebrew school as a young one, and
Sure.
get it that way.
Sure.
Okie doke. Well, we've come to the end of our time, and I think that we wanted to put Mary in this chapter from the Koran in this book that we have, and I'll put it up one more time. This will be in the new version. This is the current version. This has not been vetted with the Militia Immaculata yet, so we're going to work on that as our next deal. We're getting a book printed up, and that's going to be shipped to them just to show you progress, not so much that we're trying to, go underneath the militia. But the militia has approved making a 33-day version out of this book. And they did have it on their website for many, many months, and then they revised the website, and probably somebody took a look at it and say, "What's this?" And so anyway, it didn't have pictures in it, and it's not. We were going to print this up, I think, about a year ago for one of our events, just the first part. And anyway, we had 16 pages of addendum, which mushroomed into around, say, 175 pages. So. This is just one section of that, and it's basically, I couldn't see not putting this in here because this is everything of beholding your mother throughout history, and it's part of the story. So,
well, and as Christians, as Catholics, we hear things on the internet. We hear things about how, Muslims believe in Jesus, Muslims believe in Mary, well, yes and no. It's different. Right. And I think that, we've kept things fairly simple here, obviously. Right. There's a lot more here that we haven't gone into, but even this, hopefully, your listeners have at least a little bit more knowledge here, and certainly can get a lot more.
Wet, so
exactly.
These books
exactly, and then once that comes out, they can learn even more.
Right.
Yeah.
And launch into your own thing as well. There's a lot of pieces in the back of here that they talk about. Well, where did the Celtic cross come from? And it was not from Ireland. It was from the East. And, it talks in that book that I copied from, and I even copied that paragraph, that it's going to take people in the future that know, the ancient Ireland languages, the Celtic, and there's old Celtic, and there's a newer version. There's people that need to know, along with that, the Eastern languages from which these things came. So it's all sorts of languages, and he's just putting out a plea for people to study, because more stuff gets discovered with archaeological digs all the time. And then they have a new piece that they have, that they want to categorize and say, gee, it's another pointer to the east of where this pockets of excellence of Marian devotion were in in the Western world. Otherwise, it'd be devoid of a lot of this Marian stuff. And then the orders pick up from there. And the orders are another way that the word about Mary gets, promulgated. So we like to say in the church, we have two lungs, the east and the west. And, a good, healthy body breathes with both lungs, as Pope John Paul II. And we're just highlighting some of these things in the back of this book. And so we're going to move on with the rest of today and let you get back to listening to Doug Hinderer with Marriage Unhindered on Relevant Radio. And we're going to sign off for this. KMMK 88.7 FM Coggon, Cedar Rapids, talk radio for Catholic living. And give a special thank you to our guest today, Donald Krouse. And people may know Kendall with Christ Our Life and a lot of other activities at the high school and Immaculate Conception and just around town in general. So
yeah, Christ Our Life last weekend of September this year, Des Moines. So
Yep, be there.
we'll be running ads.
And I think, is Father Spitzer going to be back again?
Father Spitzer is going to be there, absolutely.
Again?
Yes,
He was there last year.
He was there last time,
Yeah.
and he's coming back. And
that's good.
great lineup. And it's youth 23 and under are free and get pizza
Okay.
for lunch.
And
Free
also,
pizza.
Also, there was somebody here at the Archdiocesan Men's Conference that I think is going to be speaking out there. Gabriel Castillo.
Yes.
And is Keith Nestor going to be there again or no?
He's not speaking, but I bet he's going to be
Yeah,
there.
he's gonna be-
He
right.
usually is.
Right.
And then for adults, $30 covers both days. I mean, this is the cheapest conference with world-class speakers are coming from, I think it's 8 different countries. I mean, we have an international lineup here.
Well, Magnus
So,
McFarlane. I mean,
Magnus
he's big.
McFarlane Barrow from Scotland. We've got a nun,
he's part of Christ
a nun from Ethiopia.
Okay.
We've got a speaker from Australia. I mean, this is just this is a world-class
world-class.
conference in our backyard.
Right. And it's just weird, like, what, in Des Moines? What is this doing? And you can't really point to another conference that this is.
No, put it on your calendars now. Last weekend of September, and hope to see you there. And if you can't make it in person, you can live stream it.
Okay.
Same $30 cost, or and I know churches in town have done watch parties in the past too. So
Yes.
yeah.
Well, thanks for being. That was like on cue. I didn't expect that. That was a great. Boy, he knows a lot about that. He's listening to Kendall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of times we're just like we can say we're the husband of our wife, and that's our biggest claim to fame in life. So, and I'll
There
go
we
with
go.
that. Okie doke. So we'll see you next time.